As we reported earlier, tomorrow is the certification process for the Electoral College on Capitol Hill. But at least a dozen Republican senators and around 140 representatives have said they plan to contest the results. Joining me now on Skype is Christopher Bedford, senior editor for the Federalist. Chris, welcome back. Always great to speak with you. So, Chris, what's your take on the challenge to the Electoral College votes? What do you think it'll accomplish, if anything?
Well, it's an important challenge to have, and I'm glad that these senators are doing it, but it's not going to change anything as far as who's the president next month of the United States. It's an important challenge because there are huge forces in our government and in our Congress and also in our news media who are trying to tell everyone in America that nothing was fishy with this election. There's no such thing as electoral fraud. There's nothing that's worth looking into and making sure this kind of thing doesn't happen again on the scale that it appears it might have happened. Those people are completely wrong, and there needs to be a national conversation about this. However, for those folks who are also saying that there's a chance that the senators involved here will be able to overturn the election and to change the outcome of this, that ship has already sailed. You were to take multiple judges, multiple rulings in multiple states to have complete redos of those elections. And basically how it comes down is the cake was baked on election day. Any mistakes that were made need to be fixed going forward, but they've already been made.
Chris, is this situation unprecedented? Have we ever seen like this before? A situation like this before?
We've seen situations that are similar to this, but not in the last 130 or so years, 140 years in the United States. We also see a lot of different pushbacks from the U.S. Congress to the election results. Every single Republican president who's won this century has had different objections coming from the House of Representatives. But this is peculiar in that it's got U.S. senators who are also backing it. That means that a dozen, 13, maybe 14 senators backing this means about 28 hours of debate that will be coming, and that's what separates it from any other previous objections recently.
I want to switch gears a little bit here. What are your thoughts on the Senate runoff in Georgia, and what will you be watching as the results come in?
It would be a major thing to look at turnout here. It's completely up in the air. Talking to people who are on the ground and people who are in the bird's eye view watching from Washington, D.C. here. These elections are really tight, potentially very tight. Georgia's becoming much more of a purple state, even if it has a red tinge to it. And if 20,000 voters decide that they don't trust in the electoral system anymore, that they don't trust in the candidates, and they're not going to come out for the Republicans, then you might end up seeing one, possibly two Democratic senators coming to D.C. from Georgia. If you got two Democratic senators coming to D.C. from Georgia, that would tip the balance and put President-elect Joe Biden and Kamala Harris in charge of the executive, in charge of the U.S. House, and in charge of the U.S. Senate.
You know, something else there's a lot of talk about is the president's recorded phone call with Georgia's Secretary of State, which was released really just days before the election. What are your thoughts on that, Chris, on that conversation? And do you think that will have an impact on Georgia voters?
I think it will have an impact on some of the Republican voters potentially. And the Democrats are already extremely motivated. A lot of Republicans are also motivated, but the president's been having to do whatever he can, and he's been doing a lot, going down to Georgia multiple times, to make sure that his voters still show up, even while he says that they were cheated. I understand the president's frustration with the Georgia Secretary of State. He's been essentially useless and unwilling to even look at allegations of fraud, which I don't think are helpful to the voters, aren't helpful to our republic. Just take away the names Donald Trump and Joe Biden for one moment, and imagine any kind of presidential election between any two candidates, whether or not you support either one of them, where there's this many questions left lingering afterwards. It seems to be it's the job of the Secretary of State to really go after that. He hasn't really done that, but doesn't make that phone call particularly helpful to the president.
Chris, we don't have a lot of time left, but I want to touch on all the money that was poured into the Georgia races. Can you talk about that and also the influence of out-of-state money in the race?
It's mostly out-of-state money, and it's an incredible amount of money that's been pouring into Georgia. Funny thing is, money doesn't always make quite as much of a difference as we used to think it did. In the aftermath of Citizens United, the Supreme Court case has said all this outside money and what they call dark money can be spent in races. We've seen a lot of different upsets, like when President Donald Trump beat Hillary Clinton despite being massively outspent. John Ossoff, for example, has lost a House of Representatives seat previously in Georgia, despite having the most expensive House of Representatives race in history. Both sides are pouring in all this money, but if you look at the major players in U.S. politics as far as money goes, people like Charles Koch, they don't have a huge impact anymore in U.S. politics because it really does come down to local elections at the end of the day. You don't want to be outspent for sure. You want those resources, but that doesn't decide an election on its own.
Okay, we're going to leave it right there. Christopher Bedford, senior editor for the Federalist. Thanks so much, Chris. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.